Good evening. It is my great pleasure to be here for this opening of Where the Dream Began. I am Dr. Jason Miller. I am Professor, Associate Head, and Director of Undergraduate Studies at NC State University. It has been my distinguished honor over the past few years to help tell the story of Rocky Mount, of Dr. King's great speech here, and to partner with the City of Rocky Mount, the Imperial Center, and so many wonderful folks who are here in this room this evening to help tell this story and spread the good news. I'd like to begin as one of three important speakers this evening by highlighting three important things that you might not know. Not only do we know for sure that Dr. King's first documented use of I Have a Dream took place right here in Rocky Mount, but we also know that that story, in all its vast and numerous enunciations, is going to be retold in many different formats. So one thing you might not know about before you leave is we have this wonderful painting to your left by artist Cynthia St. James. She is an internationally known artist with works across the globe in different installations that are at airports or in a number of different facilities, including embassies. And she was commissioned by me to create an original piece of artwork telling this story between the connection of Langston Hughes, Dr. King, and she has portrayed Dr. King on the left, Langston Hughes on the right, and those of you that know Langston Hughes' works very well, the great Jesse B. Simple in between. This piece of art will be here, and it will be an important way to continue to tell the story and add to it in any number of ways. The last thing I want to tell you about before turning it over to our wonderfully distinguished guests is that this story is going to go far beyond Rocky Mount. Because of the partnership and cooperation of the Imperial Center, the city, so many folks around the state who have been thrilled and excited, my own Department of English at NC State University, we have a measurable grant to help tell this story at a showcase event at NC State University being held on September 16th and 17th. What will happen? You'll hear more about the audio. You'll be able to watch more about the documentary film and hear from the great guests we have here today that were at the original speech. You will be able to meet Cynthia St. James, who will be on hand. Dr. King's first Pulitzer Prize winning biographer, David Garrow, will be on hand, and highlighting the event in our marquee event, actors Danny Glover and Felix Justice will be performing what they call a night with Martin and Langston. So Rocky Mount's story will be told in greater enumeration at NC State University. And again, those of you that know me know I am just incredibly humbled and thrilled to play a small role in that particular item. The last thing I want to mention before we keep the program moving is it's so important to know our history, and it's equally important to have the opportunity to experience it. The people we're here from tonight, the incredible guests in the audience who lived part of this history, just can't be replaced. Some of these panels, I can't even begin to tell you how thrilled I am to bring us all the way back to the railroad, to Booker T. Washington, to Dr. King, and being able to hear this audio gives us a chance to experience this. We'd like to think of time as being something like a pendulum, but it's really a river. And we'd like to think of history as being a timeline, but unfortunately it's like a spring that's been flattened and turned on its side. It's cyclic and progressive. And we know how far we want to come and how far we end up having to go back to get there again. And we know that we're at one of those moments again in our own history at this particular time of trying to move forward and yet finding we seem so many ways to be right back where we used to be. I hope this evening and our incredible leadership within this community, which I am just thrilled to be a small part of, can help keep moving us forward. We go back so that we can go forward. I'd be remiss if I didn't leave us with one poem. The great Langston Hughes, who was an inspiration of Dr. King, wrote this incredible poem. It was published in 1941. He had a dream that I think many of us still have a dream. He wrote, "I dream a world where man no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul nor avarice blights our day. A world I dream where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and every man is free, where wretchedness will hang its head, and joy like a pearl attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream our world. Thank you for letting me be a part of this wonderful evening.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm so pleased to be here and also to help support and be a part of this wonderful exhibit and this wonderful reconnection with our history. A history that was just an everyday part of the struggle for us, but now has become a much bigger part of the story of civil rights and the story of Dr. Martin Luther King and the story of our community, which is very important. I think I was asked by Allison just to talk about what my recollections are of the visit and also what the impact has been on my life and the community, and to bring that perspective. And I think there will be some discussion, is that correct? Or maybe? Okay. Well, as a child doing this visit and doing the visit of Martin Luther King, first of all, I was a member of First Baptist Church where Reverend Dudley was the pastor. And hearing preachers talk about civil rights and segregation and what we needed to do was not necessarily an unusual thing. My parents were activists, and that often happened both in our home and in many of the meetings and church services and things we went to. But of course, this was a different and important time, and this man was a different and important man because of what he had been doing around the country. But I just want to tell my recollection from the memory of a child, which was that what stands out for me is remembering several things. One is that segregation was bad and that was harmful to us. And at this time, I was 10 years old in the 5th grade, just going to the 6th. And integration was what we needed to do, was what I remembered as a child. Integration was what Martin Luther King said we need to do, and that segregation was bad. The other thing that I picked up as a child from that visit that night was that the fact that it was not true that whites were superior to blacks or that whites were better than blacks. That was not true. And that it was not true that we were inferior. And that that hurt both of us. That it was both a myth that we were inferior, myth being a big word. It was not true that we were inferior and that caused problems for us, and that it was not true that they were superior and that caused problems for them. And the other thing that sticks out to me from that night was the message I got for children, for the young people, is that our job was to do our best. That we couldn't just do, quote unquote, the black best or the colored best. That our job was to do the absolute best. And that was the way that we win that battle of civil rights. That's what I remember taking away as a child. And it was interesting because at that time in '62, in the spring, and I have some pictures of this I'll pass around, of '62, Governor Terry Sanford had come to Rocky Mount on his school tour. And as a part of that tour, he had visited Parker, what was then the new Parker Junior High School. And the big news in the black community, and for me as an adolescent, was that we were going to get to go to this new school, Parker Junior High, that was the separate and equal of Edwards Junior High. So they were kind of a similar design, if you're familiar with those two facilities. And so that was the big news. We were excited about separate but equal, that was more equal than what we had in 1962. And we were all looking forward to going. And in fact, on that day that Terry Sanford came, it was the day that the elementary students were visiting Parker to learn about junior high, and you know, was sort of our orientation, giving us something to look forward to. And this was part of the new, you know, sort of gradual plan to tackle segregation and to move toward desegregation. But after that visit, and I can't say it was directly related, you know, as a child, but it seemed to me that after that visit, the energy started to shift, at least in my house, after Martin Luther King's visit in that November, because by the summer, there were meetings at my house, white and black folks at my house. Now this is as a child now, white and black, coming to talk to me about the need to integrate the schools in Rocky Mount and looking for black kids who would go to the white schools under what was then called something called freedom of choice. And all I remember is thinking that this is what Martin Luther King said we're supposed to do. You know, we had the way to change segregation and to fight this battle is that we have to integrate. So because of that, I was one of the kids, and there were several of us, but I was one of the youngest and the only one in the 7th grade to integrate Edwards Junior High School. And many of you who've been with me at different times have perhaps heard me talk about this before, even though I don't talk about it a whole lot. But I was the only child in the 7th grade there, but Shamanica invited me over to Edwards to talk to her 7th graders about that several years ago. And so it, to me, was a part of a big shift we kind of moved from excitement about trying to make separate but equal be equal to taking on this new battle of integration. And from there, for me, it was sort of the vintage of my time, being a child of segregation, a teenager doing desegregation and integration and desegregation, affirmative action, the women's movement, etc. So in my life, I moved through a whole series of being one of the early black students at UNC Chapel Hill of any quantity. You know, we had like 80 black students anywhere in any school they had when I went there in 69, for example. And then the same in law school. And when I had my first job at the Industrial Commission, I was one of the first African Americans there. So it's not so much that it's anything necessarily special about me as much as it is the time. It was the particular vintage of my time. And that was a lot of what went on. And for a lot of people of my age and vintage, they have played those roles. In closing, I guess what I would say that stands out to me, too, somehow I got, and I don't remember if it was so much from this visit or from what I saw on TV or the accumulation of everything I knew about Martin Luther King at the time, but even as a child, and I think it was just the strong, because I'd heard nobody speak, you know, he had a way of speaking that was different, you know, from anybody else. But it was something about, even as a child, understanding that love was the answer to the problem of prejudice and racial hatred and discrimination and racism. And that it wasn't helpful, or it wasn't helpful to hate the person who was discriminating against you. So somehow I understood that enough that when I went into Edwards as the only black child in that class, and when people were mean to me or, you know, were antagonistic or hostile to me, there was a way that somehow I knew that it was not about me, but it was something about them, in the sense that it was something they misunderstood, didn't know. You know, it wasn't hating them and what their situation was did not help my situation. There was some way as a child I knew that. And so I think the benefit for me of that experience, even though it had some negative consequences, because that was my adolescence that was contributed to that whole process. But I think what did help me was to understand that for whites who did have racial prejudice, because I was there with them every day up close and personal over those several years and saw their transformation over that time, I came to understand that it was what they didn't know. It was misinformation, lack of information, in many instances ignorance on their part, and just bad programming on their part that led to a lot of the prejudice and misinformation and the racial prejudice that was there and the segregation that was a part of it. So that would be the main thing I would say. And when you come to today, I guess if there's anything I'm still sad about, it is that it's a continuing struggle. It's not over. There was a part of me that wanted to think we had accomplished these goals and we would then enjoy the benefits of them. And in some ways we have, but the struggle is still there. That's why, for example, the whole issue about dismantling the National Rocky Mount City Schools, the National Rocky Mount school system, I take almost personally, because I feel like I put myself on the line personally as a child to integrate what was then the city of Rocky Mount school system, the Rocky Mount City Schools. And to now want to turn that back is doubly painful to me, not to speak of what it will do for our community and the children here. So sometimes, and I think the other thing that has happened, that happened to me in that situation is, and I have told this story before too, that that first day I went to school in Edwards, because you're in the 7th grade, and then we'd all meet in the gym because you didn't have a room or, you were new. And then you would be assigned to your home room or where you would go and given a little orientation. But that day that I went, I sat down and no one would sit, and there were empty seats all around me in that whole gym. And there was one young woman who came down and sat beside me. And we became good friends, and she actually is retired now, but when I was in the legislature, she worked there on the staff. So I've told this story on the floor of the legislature, which they enjoyed. But I say that to say, I think it's from that I have developed such a sensitive antenna to exclusion, to people being excluded and left out, that I can almost feel it if it's downstairs and I'm up here. And I think it led to my career in doing this work around diversity and inclusion and equity issues, and probably how come I'm so committed to it.
My name is Joyce Dickens, and for those of you who don't know, my role in this community is a civil rights soldier. And I believe that my hearing Dr. King speak ingrained that in my spirit. Before I get started, I'm going to introduce George Dudley. Is that all right, George? Because we are here and having this occasion because his father had the strength, the courage, the knowledge, the fellowship to bring Dr. King to Rocky Mount. So Brother George Bernard Dudley, Jr., right here on the front. Stand, George. I told George that the last time I saw him, he was teaching a yoga class over at Booker T, and he said it was 40 years ago. Boy, time flies, doesn't it? I praised God for using this sharecropper's daughter, just an ordinary person, to work for him and to have been influenced at an early age to believe that we have the power and the responsibility to help ourselves and our people. I praise God for exposing me to his gospel and the fact that he has all power and that I, an ordinary person, can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you my thoughts on my experience as an audience member, November 27th, 1962, when Dr. King spoke to the citizens of Rocky Mount at Booker T. Washington High School. He came to help us, to help set us free from oppression, injustice, and racism, to encourage us to struggle, to fight for freedom and justice, to show us our dignity, our power, and to help bring our self-respect and self-worth to the forefront. He came to tell us that we are somebody and that God was on our side. I was 15 years old, Angela, and in the 9th grade, and I was attending Booker T for the first semester until J.W. Parker was completed. And so the school was completed in January '63, and the second semester we left Booker T and went to Parker. Interestingly enough, Parker is one of those schools now on the hit list, and you compared it to Edwards. Pope's already been put in another place. And so it's very interesting. The timing is very interesting. The impact of Dr. King's words, his passion, and his direction continue to influence my life today. I internalized his message. It became real in me. My life has been a public journey of public service and community building. He gave me hope. He gave me a sense of direction. His words showed a clear path of what we had to do. He made me aware of the issues and how we could work in unity to change all of the issues. And he was a different kind of speaker, I agree with Angela, and you could feel God's gift in him as he spoke. But everybody hear him anytime can hear that in him. He described a solution to work in a struggle, to work in unity, to vote, to have faith as a people. He stated that each person, each one of us, had a responsibility and the skills to serve, to work, and to make a difference. Dr. King's message still lives in me and my chosen work, my practice of community economic development, the development of affordable housing, elderly housing, neighborhood revitalization, resource development, job creation, building tax base, building communities, infrastructure, Douglas Block, Harambe Square, Crossing at 64, Holly Street, workforce development, political empowerment, voter registration, get out to vote. All the work you witness in me is a direct result of my exposure to Dr. King's teaching, his example, his legacy, and my faith in God. The Rocky Mount King Commission chose the right theme this past year: wait no more. Wait no more. It's very appropriate. We still face, as Angela said, some of the same issues today that we faced in 1962. And I too thought that we had accomplished so much. And as I look at what's happening now, I guess, like all of you, we can see the reversal trying to take place. And we have to work together to make sure that it doesn't take place. Let's wait no more. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And since I do this work, I have to bring it into where we are today in this community and tell you that today I have a dream. We cannot continue to wait. We must continue to build. We must continue to move forward and not backwards, to fight for economic and social justice, to fight to stop the violence in our community. You saw the story in the paper today with the little boy with the gun, with the, what you call it, Charles? Pellet gun. I agree with Pastor G. I'm so glad that police officer didn't shoot that child. You know, so I'm gonna call Chief Moore, and whatever the training is that they're getting, let's get some more of that. But the violence, for me, When we had groundbreaking at Bojangles, I had my grandson to speak, and TD is at Edwards now in the 6th grade. And one of the things he talked about that day was jobs. And so I'll talk more about that in a minute, but people need to work and they need to have hope. And somehow what has happened now, when Dr. King came and spoke to us, we felt hope. That hope has diminished to the point that people don't have hope anymore. My dream is that each of us here tonight began to serve, to discover our calling and passion, and do our best, whatever it is. I have a dream that we all work for political empowerment and to vote. I have a dream that we implement the Twin County Regional Plan. We got a good plan. Housing, job creation, the food industry, education. We put together a plan. Now we need some action and some money behind the plan. I have a dream. We just, last year, I think it was, finished this housing study that identified 14 neighborhoods in our community that's deteriorating. And that dream for me now is even stronger. Early in March, the alarm company called me, and somebody had forced open a window and went into my home. And when they got in, the burglar alarm went off, and so they left. But it started me to evaluate my neighborhood. I live on Hill Street. I'm still dealing with these 14 neighborhoods. We've got to stop the deterioration. We've got to stop the deterioration in these neighborhoods that with these boarded up houses and these out-of-state owners. So I have a dream that we implement this housing study, pass a housing bond, and do something with these neighborhoods. I have a dream. And it's time that we wait no more. I have a dream that the city's designation, we're designated a White House, but from the White House initiative on strong communities and strong cities. It might be something happening with that, but I do community economic development every day. I can't put my hand on, or my eyes or my heart on what's happening with the program. And so let's come together now and do something to make something happen with this opportunity. I have a dream that, and this is where I was going with those jobs. I still quote the East Carolina University study done by Edgecombe County that showed the results that 50% of African American men in Edgecombe County between 18 and 25 have never had a job. You hear that? 50% of African American men in Edgecombe County, Rocky Mountain too, let me make it clear, between 18 and 25 have never had a job. I have a dream that we create some jobs, some programs, because I think that impacts gangs and crime, because there is no hope. I have a dream that both Pope School and Parker School survive these cuts, and that we do not divide ourselves again at the railroad track. That's a dream that we can conquer. We can do that. We can do that. So let's wait no more. Let's make the dreams a reality. And Dr. King asked the question, where do we go from here? Chaos our community. And that's a choice now. Because as things continue to deteriorate, it's moving toward chaos. But all these burglaries and all of this killing and all of this shooting, but what we've got to do is that we got to go to our community and we got to work. It was interesting to me as I did research on Booker T. Washington. I really wasn't so conscious of the fact that he came here in 1910. And so I looked at that. If you go online, there's an interesting headline that comes up with that subject of Booker T. Washington and Rocky Mountain. If you haven't seen it, go online and look at it. But my position is Booker T. Washington came to Rocky Mountain in 1910 to do work. The same work I'm asking you and everybody else in this community to do. He pushed for education, educational facilities for black people. Interestingly, Dr. King spoke at Booker T. Washington High School. Black people continue to struggle for educational facilities today, i.e. Parker, Pope, and when you look at what has happened since the merger, because some of us, Angela, myself, Willie Powell, I remember, Robert Evans, worked on the merger in 1991. And so here it is in my lifetime, I've got to work on the same issue all over again. And at this point in time, when you look at how the money's been spent, not only one school has been built on the Edgecombe County side of Rocky Mountain. Schools are closed there and are threatening to close. We got one kindergarten, but when you look out in the broader National Rocky Mountain community, how much has been spent on schools? And so now you close, you draw a line in the sand, you end up with a line of apartheid for our school system. And where are they gonna go to school? My grandchildren didn't have to get on the bus and go to Pine Tops. At any rate, what I understand is, you're Booker T. Washington now. You're Martin Luther King now. It's your turn. It's your turn to work. What will be your legacy? What are you working to do in order to benefit humankind? What's your dream? What's your passion? What are you dedicated to? Dr. King said, let's wait no more chaos or community. Let's build community. And I'll end with what I usually open with, the theme that I work under, which is the word Harambe, working together for the betterment of everyone. So can we come together and work in a spirit of Harambe in order to implement the dream?